All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Emma, and I'm the assistant store manager here at East City Bookshop. It's wonderful to be with you all today, and thanks so much for being here in person and for tuning in online if you're watching that way. We host lots of amazing events here at East City Bookshop, so make sure to check out our full events calendar on our website coming up soon. First of all, this Saturday, along with many other bookstores nationwide, we will be hosting Bookstore Romance Day, a day-long celebration of all things romance. And on August 24th, next week, we will welcome our Eric Thomas in store for the rescheduled launch of his new memoir, Congratulations, the Best is Over. We also have 14 different book clubs, so no matter what your reading tastes are, you are sure to find a community here. Now, for some housekeeping details. Number one, if you need a restroom, there's one upstairs past the cash registers and greeting cards. Number two, if you're watching from home and experiencing any technical difficulties, please let us know in the chat, and my colleague is monitoring that and can help if necessary. We will have some time for questions tonight, both for our in-person and our virtual audience. If you're watching virtually, please put any of those questions in the Q&A feature, and Sarah will be able to repeat them for you. And finally, and most importantly, our events here are made possible by book sales. So if you need to purchase a copy of the book, we have copies available upstairs at the register, and we'd be glad to help you out with that. And they can be purchased prior to the signing line. All right, so on to tonight's event. I have been a huge fan of Deanna Rayburn's books, especially the Veronica Speedwell series, for years now. So when I first heard about Killers of a Certain Age, it jumped to the top of my to-read list. It was one of my favorite books of last year, and I have been recommending it to anyone who comes in wanting something fun and fast-paced. If you haven't already read Killers of a Certain Age, then you are in for a treat. Our four leads, Billy, Mary Alice, Helen, and Natalie, have worked for an elite organization of assassins for decades and are ready for their well-deserved retirement. But when an attempt is made on their lives by another member of their organization, it becomes clear that they will have to use everything they've learned over the years to fight back and make it out alive. By the end of this book, you will be fully aware that while the women may be older, this foursome is just as badass as ever. New York Times and USA Today bestselling novelist Deanna Raybourn is a sixth-generation Texan with a degree in English and history from UTSA. Her novels have been nominated for numerous awards, including the Edgar RT Reviewer's Choice, the Agatha, and the Last Laugh. Liz Lawson is the New York Times bestselling author of The Agathas with Kathleen Glasgow and The Lucky Ones. Liz lives with her family and two very bratty cats. And now please welcome tonight's authors.
Am I on now? Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. I'm Liz Lawson, and I'm here to chat about Killers of a Certain Age with Deanna. And I loved this book so much. It was so funny and so well done. Can you tell us a little bit about the book? Just a brief.
I will,
summary.
but the first thing I'm going to do is thank you hugely for coming to do this and giving of your evening. And thank you guys too for coming out and supporting this gorgeous local independent bookseller. You are incredibly lucky to have a store like this in your community. And I'm deeply envious because I don't. So kudos to you for coming out and joining us tonight. Killers of a Certain Age is the story of four female assassins who are 60 years old and on the cusp of retirement. And the organization they work for decides that they would rather see them dead than let them retire. And so they have to band together to basically figure out where the threat is coming from and how to deal with it.
So I thought it was so great that you wrote about women of a certain age. And I was so curious, where did your inspiration come from for the book?
The idea for the book actually did not start with me. It started with my publisher. My editor called me up one day, and it's always a little bit unnerving when your editor calls you out of the blue and you don't know why they're calling. It's not going to be really bad news because they always make the agent do that.
That is
but when the editor calls, you're like, what's wrong? And she said, we were having a chat in the office because everything is done, kind of via committee in New York. And she said, the subject of stories with kick-ass older women came up, and we want to know why there are not more of them, because we do not have enough. And the discussion was had about who could we get to write one. And she said, and your name came up immediately and unanimously. So would you be interested? And I said, well, let me go have a think. And I came back a week later and I said, yeah, I would. I said, but here's the thing. I said, I got a couple things in mind. I would like to do 4 of them. And she said, that's amazing. We love that. I said, I want them to be assassins. That's amazing. We love that. And I want to write a contemporary. And that was the record scratch. That was the needle scratch on the record for them, because I had only ever written historical. I've got 2 Victorian mystery series. The one that I'm currently writing right now is very successful, and publishers are fundamentally conservative. They like to put you in a pigeonhole, and they like you to stay in that pigeonhole. And it makes sense when you understand the industry of why it's that way, because if they promote you as a particular type of author, booksellers know where to shelve you, and readers know where to find you, and librarians know how to catalog you, and everybody knows who and what you are. But if you want to break out of that pigeonhole, that's when things get a little bit dicey for the publishers, because it's a huge risk. If you have been successful at what you're doing, and I've been successful at Victorian mystery, and kudos to them, they said, yeah, we think you can do it. So write a contemporary. So I started writing Killers, and I wrote a draft and sent it off to my editor, and she gave me feedback, and I cried.
As we all do.
And then I had to go write another Veronica Speedwell, which is my Victorian mystery series. I had to go write a Veronica book. And then I came back and wrote the next draft of Killers, and I sent it off to my editor and got feedback, and I cried again. And that was it was kind of lather, rinse, repeat until 96 hours before this book went into production. I figured out how to fix it and what was wrong with it. Because if anybody's read it, there are flashback scenes in it. Not one of those flashback scenes is where it is now. They were all in different places. And so literally 96 hours before the book was due, I figured out where each one needed to go, because I figured out what the formula was behind it. And so I had just that, because I'm talking drop dead, this is going into production. You do not have a minute more than this allotted time span. So for 4 days, I stayed in my pajamas and I wrote and fell into bed for a few hours of sleep. And then I got up, and I do not recommend this. This is like, and by the end of that time, I was absolutely feral. The dogs were like, girl, you need a shower. Thank God my husband was out of town, because like the romance would have been well and truly dead at that point. But by the end of those 96 hours, like the book was done. I sent it in at 5:30 Friday afternoon, and Monday morning, my editor called and she said, you did it. This is it. And it's into production now. And I cried again, but for a completely different reason. Yeah. I had a lot of trouble finding my contemporary voice, because my Victorian voice, my Veronica Speedwell voice, man, it's there. Anytime I want to access it, I know exactly what it sounds like. But writing this, I had the flashbacks are all told third person, and I did not have that voice. And then Billy's voice is the main narration for the action that's present day, and I didn't have that one either. And so I was kind of floundering a little bit. And I remember at the beginning, there was one scene that I wrote about 5 or 6 times. And I just could not figure out how to get the voice right. And finally, I just said, screw it. I'm just going to tell it. I'm not going to write it. And so I sat down and just wrote it as if I was telling somebody. And I handed it off to my husband. And I said, I have zero objectivity at this point. I have no idea whether this is any good or not, because I've written this scene so many times. And he read it, and about halfway through, he started laughing. And I said, what's so funny? And he said, babe, this is your Twitter voice. And that's when I went, oh, nailed it. Because for any of you who follow me on Twitter, like that is authentically who I am. That's me at about 95%. I swear marginally less on Twitter than I do in real life. But yeah, so that's when I finally cracked the voice, and I had the voice down, but getting the structure correct was something that was the feedback I was getting from the editor, where, I cried a lot. But so when I tell you that blood and sweat and tears went into this book, please believe that is absolutely true.
So were those flashback scenes there originally? Like, was that
Oh, yeah.
part? Okay. So
Yeah,
you always had dual timeline.
I always had the flashback scenes there. And that was another thing, is trying to figure out, how do you write those?
Mhm.
I'm going to name drop for just a second. I have a couple of writer friends who are extremely successful at this. Ariel Lawson and Lauren Willig both write books that have multiple timelines in them. And so I called them both up and said, how do you do this? I said, literally, how do you do it? What's the mechanics behind it? Do you sit down and write all of one timeline first and then write the second timeline? Do you alternate? How do you do that? And of course, they both have completely different methods, which was not at all helpful. And they're both brilliant at it. Ariel Lawson wrote a book about Anastasia, the younger daughter of Tsar Nicholas, that is so phenomenally, exquisitely crafted with regard to multiple timelines, that she does this conjuring trick at the end of this book with these multiple timelines that I was like, this is definitely the person I need to ask about this. And then I ended up not taking her advice at all because process is weird, It
is. Yeah. I've always been curious about dual timelines, like how, not necessarily how to write both of them, because it's just like, writing one timeline and then writing the other, but how to make that jigsaw puzzle come together.
Yeah, Lauren Willig is the one who told me that she will alternate them depending on which one she feels like writing that day. So if she feels like one is getting a little stale, she'll switch to the other one and do that instead.
Interesting.
And so I thought, well, good for you. That's brilliant. Good for you. So that's actually closer to what I started doing, is because I was like, oh, I feel like killing a priest in Rome today. So I would do that. And then another day I was like, I feel like a trip through the Paris catacombs. Let's write that. So
speaking of the Paris catacombs, how did you come up with the ways that they assassinate people in this book? It's just like ingenious. I loved all of the different ways, and particularly the Paris catacombs. I don't want to give any spoilers, but that was so intricate in terms of like the explanation behind it and the action there. Did you go there and explore the catacombs yourself, or did you just? Oh, that's amazing.
I did, but
That's awesome.
I didn't leave the marked path.
Yeah, of course.
I didn't.
She didn't. We swear.
Maybe I did. No, I will. Almost all the settings in the book I've actually been to.
Cool.
I've been to St. Kitts, I've been to New Orleans. So these are all places that I love. And I went to the Paris catacombs, and they are, if you got the impression from reading the book that they are kind of gruesome and nasty, then I didn't do a very good job, because they are so gruesome and nasty that I cannot even like wrap my head around it. It's extraordinarily moving actually to be there, because we're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of bodies, and they don't lay them out like all the bones of one person in one room. This is the femur room, and it's femurs all the way up to the ceiling, all the way down. And the tunnels go on for, it feels like miles. You're just walking and walking and walking and walking. And it is a very solemn place. And you can see that the bones were removed there and installed there with a great deal of care, and a great deal of respect. And so like, I wasn't taking pictures or taking notes when I was in there, because I felt like it was a place that should be treated respectfully while you're in there. But oh God, the smell. It's this old bone smell, and there, as well as the fact that you're about 65 feet underground. When you go, there's a huge staircase, spiral staircase that you take down to get into the catacombs. And I am mildly claustrophobic. So the entire time I was like, this is fine. This is fine. Deep breath. Oh no, that's a mistake. And I found out after I got home, there are about 4 or 6 varieties of mold that only exist in the Paris catacombs. No place else on earth. No place else on earth. Yeah. Which I thought was fascinating and kind of gross, and probably explains why I came home sick. Yeah, but if you want to talk about the actual methods of murder, we can talk about
I do, always.
Okay, this is when we issue the caveat. Yes, they will work. No, don't try them. I do not want to be subpoenaed as a witness for your defense. No, that's not happening. Yeah, but they do actually work.
All of them. And what kind of research did you do to figure them out? Nothing on hands-on, I assume.
No, no, not killing folks for fun,
For research,
for profit. You guys are on to me. No, and I mean, this is like a government town, and I feel like I'm already on some watch lists. You guys be cool. Be cool. No, because I always have to Google, like, how long does it take a human body to bleed out? Because I always forget. And then, so the last one I was like, bookmark. Awkward. No, a couple of the methods, like, because of the fact that my assassins are having to work without the benefit of their cue, like James Bond has. They can't work with the lab they usually do. They don't have these resources. So I needed them to be able to kill people. You know, I always like to say that they're the kind of women who could walk down the aisle of CVS and find 17 different ways to kill you, because there are 17 different ways to kill you in any given aisle at CVS. I mean, that's just the way it works. So I wanted them to have the opportunity to use things that maybe folks wouldn't ordinarily think of as being dangerous. And, you know, there were the intersections of a couple of different things, because my Victorian mysteries, I use poison fairly often in that, because poisons were awesome for Victorians, because a lot of the tests that we use now to determine, you know, the pathology of how somebody died, a lot of those tests hadn't been invented yet. You know, there was the Marsh test for arsenic, but a lot of the other things they really couldn't detect. And so you could bung somebody full of, you know, aconite and you're good to go. You just inherited the estate. So I already knew some things, and you know, again, not to give too much away, but I knew exactly how poisonous tobacco was. And so that kind of led me into one of the murders, because I thought, okay, it's very easy to acquire cigarettes. It's very easy to extract the nicotine. I got very nervous because I follow a couple of really, really darling toxicology doctors on Twitter. They're so cute. They're young and adorable, and I love them. And they're young enough to be my sons. And the fact that they're experts in toxicology just kills me. But one of them messaged me a couple weeks ago, and he was like, I just picked up your book and started reading it. And I messaged him back and said, oh God, don't. But then he came back and he was like, no, you got it right. It's fine. I was like, oh God. Because yeah, you really, I mean, cigarettes are extraordinarily lethal if you know, pull the nicotine out and distill it.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, we know they're lethal anyway, but
yes.
You know, this is an
slowly lethal.
Yeah. And because the very, very first book that I ever had published, I had to research transdermal poisons, as opposed to, because poisons can come in a number of different ways. Mostly we're accustomed to the idea of people ingesting poison, but you can also be poisoned by something coming in through a mucous membrane or being absorbed just through the surface of the skin itself. Right. And so there are lots of different ways to introduce toxins to the body. And so I kind of had some familiarity with transdermal poisons, and nicotine is one. Huh. Yeah.
So clearly the historicals that you've written really helped with this book, like in terms
Absolutely,
just in terms of murder,
because these were low tech. Yes, exactly. Because these were low tech,
right?
And because I wasn't relying on, you know, the latest fancy lab created untraceable poison, or, you know, some sort of extremely sophisticated weaponry. You know, it was cigarettes and cheese wires. You know, so knitting needles, and plus I really, really love the idea of using murder methods that had to do with things that traditionally code female. Baking, knitting, brewing sun tea, you know, that kind of thing, as well as spa treatments, you know.
Yeah.
So that was an extra little layer in there of you know, sort of feminist power.
I love that. How did you said you went to your like when the publisher came to you, said they have this idea that they wanted you to play around with. How did you decide you wanted to have 4 women?
Because I'd never done anything like it before. It's the same reason that I wanted to do a contemporary, is because it absolutely scared the bejesus out of me. Because up until now, my series have all had one strong female lead character and a really super sexy hot guy who helps her, historically hot guy, who helps her solve mysteries. And I thought, I love the idea of exploring the dynamic of having 4 main characters. And as I started thinking about it, I was considering the kind of the projects that always seem to crop up. They have 4 women in them, starting with like Little Women and Golden Girls and Living Single and Sex and the City. And, you know, you think the more you go looking for projects with multiple women, it's extraordinary how often it's a quartet. And when you look at these foursomes, they always break down into the same archetypal characters.
Really?
Yeah. You always have a spoiled brat. That's Natalie.
Uh-huh.
She's our Amy March. You always have a leader who does not want to be a leader, but she's the best at it. So she steps up and takes care of business. And that's Billy.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I've never really thought about that, but that's very true.
Yeah, it was amazing. I started mapping it out. Part of my process is when I brainstorm, I only ever brainstorm longhand. I buy giant sheets of newsprint from Staples, these big pads of newsprint, just a bit blank paper.
Wow.
And markers. And I just work stuff out, you know, on these big pieces of paper. And then I write directly onto the computer. So, you know, if I'm writing a draft, it's always on a keyboard. If I'm brainstorming, it's always with hand.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. And then somewhere in there, I'll make a visual reference board with tear sheets from magazines and things I've printed out. And the last Veronica, I actually made a murder board, like with the red yarn and everything. It was amazing.
That's so cool. Your own murder board. Oh, that's like a dream. That's so cool.
Yeah. I love making murder boards. That's my favorite thing now.
It's really neat.
It's my favorite thing. Murder boards.
Did they include that in the book? They should have, like, just as like a little, like, I don't know.
No,
And
the killers have kind of a version of a murder board in a way, because they're forced to use like the back of old Christmas wrapping paper and like My Little Pony markers. So, you know, murder, but make it fun.
Yeah.
So,
Did you identify with any of the women more than the others? Like,
are you asking me if I have homicidal tendencies? Because I feel like that's the subtext of that question. No, but I do have a very soft spot for Billy. I love all the characters for lots of different reasons, but Billy is the one. I borrowed bits and pieces. I never ever base characters on people I actually know, but I grew up in South Texas, and I knew a lot of women who were extraordinarily strong, who got slapped down a lot by life and who picked themselves up a lot over and over and over again. And they were very, very strong. And I kind of borrowed a few little bits and pieces here and there from them as an homage. And the name Billy, I borrowed from my great aunt, who was a woman like that. She did not kill people. But you know, she should have actually. No, I mean, I'm just saying, I met her husband. But yeah, so I used just some little glimmers of inspiration from a few people, just to make the book a little more personal, I guess.
I love that. And I also really loved with Billy how she was such a strong character, but like she had a softness to her, you know, like including the whole backstory about like her love and like how she lost him and then having him come back. And no spoilers, but like I felt like that really gave you, like the reader, a chance to identify with her a little bit more. You know, she wasn't just like this badass killer. She was a person who killed.
And she's also a person who knew exactly what she wanted, and she wanted the work, she wanted this life. And I loved, you know, so often we see stories, whether they're fiction or whether they're people we know, where the women are giving up their dreams and their careers, and they're putting these things on hold because, you know, what he wants comes first. And in this case, Billy's like, no, I know you want the picket fence and the kids, and, you know, that's your dream. It's not mine.
Yeah.
And so that's why she's able to just continue on, you know, in the life that she wants, because she's not going to compromise that.
Yeah. Which is so, I mean, that it's not a thing you see very often in media.
That's why it was important to me to do it.
Yeah.
It's because it felt less expected.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of, like, I could just keep thinking, because you mentioned like Golden Girls and Sex and the City, and I have seen all these memes around, as I'm sure a lot of people have, where it's like the Golden Girls were 55 years old. And here's the Golden Girls, who I always thought were like in their 70s. And here is like a 55-year-old now. And these women are not the Golden Girls. Like,
no. B. Arthur was 55, as you say. I'm 55. And so our views on aging are a little bit different now than they used to be. We are living longer. We are extending middle age later than we used to. I've seen photos of my grandmother when she was 45, and she looked ancient, like she had settled in firmly into middle age. And we're different now. And a lot of people, when they first read the book, they're like, oh, I see Helen Mirren as Billy. And I'm like, Helen Mirren is 75. Because, do you know who's 60? Jamie Lee Curtis, Diane Lane, Angela Bassett. And so those are all these incredibly gorgeous, kick-ass women from my teenage years are all turning 60 right around now. And they do not look like what we think 60 looks like. And so Michelle Pfeiffer.
No, I agree with that.
You're my favorite.
Are those people going to be in the movie?
Oh my God, wouldn't that be awesome? That would be awesome. I would love that. I generally hate answering casting questions like, who do you see? Because it's very important to me that readers never think there's a correct specific answer. Whoever you imagine in your head is absolutely 100% right. I will say I did keep a little picture of Diane Lane taped to my computer as I was working, because I just feel like she's got a Billy vibe. But I mean, so would Angela Bassett, so would Michelle Yeoh. There's so many different women who could play that role and crush it, that I would be like, yeah, do it. It's great.
Yeah. So I thought it was really interesting how you included the character of Akiko, like, and how when she first finds out that like Mary Alice is an assassin, she's totally freaked out, as like anyone would be, but she didn't know, she had no idea that her wife is like a killer. And it's almost like, it almost felt, and I don't know if this was purposeful or even like if I was just reading into it, but it almost felt like she gave us, the reader, a way to like kind of question, like, is what they're doing moral? Like, is what they're doing, like, they're killing, and it's like a funny book, but also they're killing. So was that intentional? Like that?
Yeah, because I think that for the most part, the book it's a fantasy. You're supposed to have fun with it. The idea, the thing is, this book came along at a very, very good time for me, because I've basically been pissed off since 2016. And so this was a very cathartic book to be able to write and go, oh, you know what? Just the fantasy of thinking that people who do terrible, terrible things are made to pay for those terrible, terrible things is kind of a lovely and powerful thing to go, oh, okay, that feels good to sit in that space just for a minute and think that folks are not getting away with it, that retribution is coming. But of course, there are always going to be readers who do not want to suspend disbelief that far and who are going to question it. But I wondered too, for me, it was actually more about just the logistics of how awkward it must be if you're dating somebody. Like, at what stage do you say, hey, by the way,
that is true.
I snore, and I have a mild case of athlete's foot, and I kill people. Like, when you're telling your deep dark secrets to somebody that you're dating, like, when does that come up?
Yeah.
How do you do that? Do you wait till you're married? Because I would think for some folks that's a deal breaker.
I would think
so.
Possibly.
When do you introduce it? Like, what's the protocol? We have one married couple in the book who were married for a long time, and they both knew, that was fine for them. But I loved the idea of Mary Alice being insecure enough, because she and Akiko have only been married for 3 years. I love the idea of Mary Alice being insecure enough that when she finally finds the love of her life, she's like, oh, I can't do that. I can't, I'm going to screw this up if I tell her who I really am. So I'll just kind of not mention it. And so Akiko, because she's not stupid, has formed her own opinions and just thinks that she's a spy, and thinks that she's basically James Bond, and kind of gets a horrible shock when she realizes that no, the job is much, much worse than that.
Yes. Yeah. I thought it was just like so well done how she's like so shocked by it. and then she comes around eventually, but her initial response is like, is very funny.
Well, but she's also kind of been imperiled by what Mary Alice does. And so when she finds out, she's already in this really heightened state of stress. And Kevin, the Norwegian forest cat, is not making things easier on her.
Oh my gosh. Yes. How did you decide to have the cat go along on their journey?
Because it's funny.
It is so funny.
It's funny to have this big ass cat, who's cranky. And I have a weakness for animals with human names. And so I loved this kind of, Kevin. I feel like Kevin is just very disapproving of, he does not like to travel. He is not at all happy. And so he's just kind of introducing a little bit of levity in the entire situation that they've got going on.
Yeah. I love the name Kevin for a cat. My cats are named Joseph and Leo. So
I love it.
I really was on board with that.
I actually had a reader contact me very distressed because the fact that, Kevin could not go along with them because he wouldn't be able to get it. And I'm like, you have to calm down.
It's fiction.
It's fiction.
Yeah, you're like, there are also parts of this book that are more fantastical than the cat coming along with them.
Right. I mean, it's like, that's the word. Yeah, that's the word. Like Kevin got into the UK.
Oh, that's what they were caught up on, was the immigration part.
Yes. It was the immigration that had this guy so stressed out. And I was like, really? And then because I thought about the kind of fatal spa treatment, and I was like, that seems normal to you?
Or them climbing up through the catacombs. No, it's the cat coming to
it's
England.
Getting admitted to the UK without the proper paperwork. That just
hilarious. The things that people get stuck on are just,
it's deeply fascinating. It is deeply fascinating.
So, I mean, you've talked a lot about how moving into the contemporary space was a little bit challenging in terms of finding the voice. Do you think it was writing a contemporary, or that you have written, so many in your other series that moving away from those voices was difficult?
I think it was a combination of the two.
Yeah.
I think it's because I hadn't done a contemporary before, but I think it's also because the fact that I had probably written 7 or 8 Veronica Speedwells before I started this. And you get into such a groove with things that if you don't take a break when you're writing a series once in a while to explore another writing voice, then it's very easy to kind of get ossified into that writing voice. So I'm very, very glad that Killers came along when it did, because it gave me a chance to kind of, take a breath and get some fresh air in there and then go back to Veronica. And then my concern was, oh God, can I do Veronica again? Can I get back into, and yeah, I was able to pick that up with no problem.
Well, that's good.
It was a relief.
Did you ever feel like her voice crept into any of these characters?
No, I kept her firmly shut away. Great. No, I shoved her in a closet and locked the door and said, girl, not till I call for you. So.
Yeah, because I know that that can be such a difficult thing as a writer to find the unique voice of your characters. Especially, it sounds like you wrote some of this book and then wrote another Veronica Speedwell and came back to this book. So jumping from voice to voice can be very challenging. I find it very challenging.
Yeah,
sometimes.
it helps if you can take some time off.
Yeah.
If you can finish a draft and then take a few weeks off and go to a different project, that makes it a little bit easier to switch. So I don't know how people who write concurrent projects do it. They're magical animals. Especially
concurrent projects that are both all contemporary or, all kind of in the same vein. I feel like that would just be, I would get very confused personally.
I know Alexander McCall Smith said that he had that issue.
Really?
Yeah, because he was supposed to be writing one of his Precious books. And he was also doing his Isabel book at the same time. And Precious started sounding Scottish and Isabel started sounding Botswanan. And so he was like, okay, I need a minute.
Yeah.
So he had to step back and kind of sort out the voices again. And I was like, thank God other writers have issues.
Oh yeah. Thank God. So speaking of other writers and processes, do you have a writing I'm always so curious about other writers' processes. Do you outline your books? Do you just kind of
I'm an organized pantser.
Okay.
I try to be really efficient.
Mhm.
So but at the same time, I don't like to outline too much.
Yeah.
Because hell, at that point, it's a book. I mean,
That's
you
what I
know,
always say.
yeah,
It's like you're just like just writing so many words, and then you have to write the book again. Like, why?
exactly. That's what it feels like. And because I remember reading Elizabeth George's book on how to write, and she writes 100-page outlines. And I was just absolutely staggered by that. And immediately after that, I read Janet Ivanovich's book, and she's a complete pantser. And I was like, okay, so the truth must lie between those two extremes. And it does for me. I know A, and I know G, and I know Q, and I know T, and I know Z, but I don't necessarily know all the other points in between. But it depends on how precise I need to be. And it depends on how much time I've got. Because if I know I'm not going to have a ton of time to write, I don't have the leeway to just be able to go and kind of write however I want and then come back. You know, I can't write my way into a scene. I have to know what I'm doing. So
yeah. So for this book, do you feel like you planned, I mean, especially in terms of like the very unique assassination methods, did you like plan those ahead of time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Because I had to do a certain amount of research to make sure that that the methods would work. And I needed the method to be kind of appropriate for who they were killing. And to work well for the person that they were killing. So I had to kind of have it all laid out. And, you know, there was a rhythm to it and a reason for killing who they did when they did. And so
it kind of escalated.
That's the,
right?
you know, that's the beauty of writing something that is essentially a mystery, is a lot of the structure is kind of taken care of for you, because in order for them to have unraveled this plot point, they have to have received these two clues and they have to be in this order. And so it just kind of dictates itself for you, which is a lovely, lovely little cheat.
Yes, that's true. I had a question and it went away from my head. In terms of research, so you mentioned that you speak to some or follow some forensics people on Twitter. Do you are they resources for you? Do you reach out to them and like bounce ideas off of them?
I'm usually really bashful about that. But I if I absolutely needed to and I could not find something, like I try to be really respectful of their time and their expertise, because I don't want them to get bombarded with people saying, hey, give me free information.
Right. Yeah.
But if I absolutely couldn't find something, then I would probably hit one of them up and say, you know, hey, do me a solid. Talk to me about this poison. But it's amazing how much you can find through Google.
So much.
And I have a nice big fat poison library.
Yeah. Your FBI agent must be just fascinated.
I know. I'd like to take them for coffee sometime. Yeah. I'm sure there's someone who's been assigned. And I hope they're enjoying it.
Yeah, I always, there's always those jokes about the FBI agents and like the Google searches.
I'm not entirely sure that it's a joke at this point.
The stuff that I Google too, I was Googling things today and I was like, this doesn't seem right. Like, should I be Googling this? Or should I use like a private browser? I don't know.
I know. And you would have thought that it would have occurred to me to browse incognito. No, I have not. It's all under my own IP. It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. No one's looking.
Well, I'm not going to be cute in federal prison.
Would any of us though? I don't think that would be a very pleasant place to be personally.
So
have you read any books that you have liked recently?
Yes. I'll give you a couple of titles that I have been very smitten with. I love anything and everything that Jessie Q Sutanto writes. And I love her. She wrote Dial A for Aunties a couple of years ago, and then there was the follow-up to it, and last I heard it's been optioned for a series on Netflix, which I'm sure production is paused right now because of the strike. But she also just a few months ago came out with Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers, and it is awesome. I love her. And I'm going to fangirl for a minute. I got to actually sit next to her at the banquet for Thriller Fest because we have the same publisher, and she is amazing in person. So absolutely go buy all of her books. If you want something historical and super fun, Claudia Gray's The Murder of Mr. Wickham and the follow-up. What is the title of the follow-up? It's something about Mrs. Willoughby.
I cannot remember. I haven't read the follow-up, but I loved the first one.
They are absolutely fantastic. I am a Jane Austen fan, and I don't read a lot of like the sequels or the pastiches or things like that, but she has done something so extraordinarily clever. She's created these murder mysteries, and she has set them in a universe in which all of the Jane Austen characters exist together. And the chronology is perfectly congruent with the Austen novels. So in The Murder of Mr. Wickham, Darcy and Lizzie have been married for 20 some odd years and have a grown-up son, but Marianne Dashwood and Colonel Brandon are newlyweds. And she has them all related to each other somehow, like Knightley and Darcy went to college together. So it all works so beautifully, and they're fantastic. And they're written by Claudia Gray, and there we have the late Mrs. Willoughby.
There we go.
Thank you. That's been driving me crazy for like a week, and I did not Google it, and I should have. Yeah, that one just came out a month or two ago, and it's the follow-up to the first one. And I'm like, I want to go stalk her and say, girl, write faster.
Her voices for the characters are so spot on. Also,
they're
like
exquisitely done. And I know she's
incredible.
working on a third one, so I'm kind of bonkers.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm very glad to hear that.
Yeah, they're highly recommended.
And what are you working on?
I don't know.
Or is it a secret?
No. When I go home, this is actually my last stop on the book tour. And so when I go home, I will be working on proofreading at the very, very last stage of Veronica number 9, which comes out next spring. It comes out in March, and it's called A Grave Robbery.
Oh, I love that title.
Thank you.
All the titles in that series are so great, though.
Thank you. About half the time I keep the working title. Sometimes they're like, no, absolutely not. I didn't title this book.
Oh yeah, I was about to ask.
No, I did not title.
Was it your
Killers.
publisher?
It was actually a man by the name of Craig Burke, who is the vice president of PR for my publisher, titled it.
Wow.
And I thought it was an absolutely brilliant title.
Oh, absolutely.
No, but I was told as soon as I turned in the first draft with a working title on it, my editor was like, no.
Would you like to share your working title?
Yeah, there's actually a clue to the working title. If you go to the Apple playlist for Killers of a Certain Age, there are multiple covers of Hazy Shade of Winter. And that's why.
Oh, that was the
working title, was Hazy Shade of Winter, because the lyrics make perfect sense because they're in the autumn of their life.
That is true.
Yeah, but no, they hated it.
I feel like
that's not commercial.
Yeah. I feel like it also feels a little bit softer than the book is.
Yeah.
But that's I mean, it would be a lovely title for a different book.
Yeah, right. Maybe something women's fiction.
Yes, exactly.
So.
A romance.
Yeah, there you go. A second chance romance.
Yes.
There we go.
There.
Okay.
We've written a book.
We're collaborating now. I love it. I love it.
Should we open up to
I
questions?
would love to open it up for
great.
questions if we have some.
Yes.
No.
I have a favorite murder in the book, and I'm just wondering if you have a favorite murder in the book as well.
Okay.
Do you want to?
No, go right ahead.
The question was, well, she said she has a favorite murder in the book, and does Deanna have a favorite murder in the book?
What's your favorite murder in the book?
It comes at the very end. Like, I don't know.
Okay. I understand you're trying to be mindful.
Read this on with my friend, and I was like, "Oh my god!" I thought it was so brilliant.
Thank you. I do have a little bit of a soft spot for the spa related murder, just because I actually thought about it when I was having a similar treatment done. And the reason for that is because when you are having a mud treatment done, you are very vulnerable. You're laying there buck ass naked with a stranger rubbing mud on your body going, is this okay? Do I trust you? And it's a very weird thing to put yourself in that situation, because there's a lot of trust. There's a lot of trust with your spa therapist. And so I just, of course, it's a weird kind of murder mind thing that happens to mystery writers. Like, we don't ever drive past a patch of kudzu without going, body. I mean, any pig farm, bodies.
Oh yeah.
I mean, we're the very, like, as soon as iPhone came out with Siri, we were the ones asking, hey, Siri, where's a good place to dump a body? And Siri would tell you. Siri used to,
really?
yeah, Siri used to give you a list, and they would
Not
say,
anymore.
No, no, but it was a thing when Siri first came out. They would say, unabandoned quarry.
Oh my God. Are you serious?
A disused mine.
I
A
can't
swamp.
believe they changed that.
I know.
How sad.
I know. But you know, it's murder mind. It's what you do. It's an occupational hazard. And it's just, you know, yeah, it's a little morbid, but it's also kind of funny.
Oh, absolutely. My
it's-
co-author for the Agathas texted me yesterday and was like, do you think you could murder someone by putting poison on their mouth night guard? And I
Yes,
was like,
absolutely. you
yeah, that's a,
Of course you
yeah.
can.
And these are just like normal conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, I remember because you know, when your child's in school and you have to go to like these assemblies and they're calling out other, you know, like you have to, and it's like 4 hours of other people and like your kid is doing something for 30 seconds because everybody's kid gets like 30 seconds to do something. And so the whole rest of the time you're sitting there going, this is great. I'm having a super fun time. I would sit there with the program and I would always be like numbering off methods of murder. And so it's like, you know, suffocation, defenestration, poisons, you know, natural poison, synthetic, and just, I would, you know, animal attack. And, you know,
Did you ever lose the program?
you know, I no, but I left him behind on purpose.
Did you? That's so funny.
Give
People
them
are like,
s-
who
give them
is
something
this?
to talk about? It'd be fine. No.
Any other questions?
Yes, ma'am.
She was annoyed when Helen didn't shoot. Why did you do that?
Because Helen was having a crisis of confidence. Because Helen was having a crisis of confidence. I needed somebody on the team to show their soft underbelly so that we could see everybody else rallying around her and lifting her up and saying, we still believe you have the soul of a killer. We know you can do your job. We still, you know, because Helen is very wounded at the beginning of this. You know, she's the one she's the only one of the four who's had a very long and successful marriage. And, you know, because Mary Alice and Akiko's marriage is still really new, and Helen is a widow and she's still hurting. And that kind of robs her of her ability to do her job for a little while. And she's got to kind of find her feet again. And, you know, because there are people who suffer really, really large losses, traumatic losses like that. And then they kind of reach this crossroads and it's like, which direction are you going? And some people never move on from the crossroads. They just kind of sit down and wait. And Helen, I feel like, was in danger of doing that. And the rest of them were all like, bitch, get up. You gotta, come on, you gotta move. We've got stuff to do. And so I feel like in a weird way, getting this mission when they got it is kind of what saves Helen. Yeah, absolutely. I know it irritated me when I wrote it. Yeah. But I will tell you, I have been to that restaurant and that's actually a great place. If you're going to like not shoot somebody, that's a great place to not shoot somebody and just enjoy your lunch. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
In line with this, like obviously it's very different if it was form and also have things that we're doing. What are the things that you wanted to highlight that were very like female specific about this?
The question was, obviously this book would look very different if it was for male assassins. So what were the things that she wanted to highlight since they were female?
I think one of them was something I've already talked about, which is the methods of murder being kind of tied to things that coded traditionally female. But another one, and probably the biggest one, was how often in the course of their missions, all throughout their career, they've been underestimated. In the first place, they're underestimated when they're young and pretty, because sometimes we do that to young women. We say, oh, she's got a pretty face. She's 22 years old. She doesn't know shit. You know, she doesn't have any experience. She doesn't know what she's talking about. There's no authority there. And we see that from the very first scene, because in the flashback scene, you see these slightly older men who are actually not that much older. They're only a couple of years older, but they have a tiny bit of seniority. And one of them calls them skirts, you know, right off the bat, they're being, you know, disrespected and undervalued. And then we see it going on because, you know, whatever disguise they're wearing, you know, whatever personas they've adopted, whatever missions they're carrying out throughout the course of their careers, you know, people are thinking less of them and not anticipating. You know, there's a beautiful thing about how invisible women can be in certain circumstances and how that invisibility can be a superpower. And it is extraordinarily strong when women get older. Women are absolutely, I mean, you hit a certain age as a woman and it's like people don't see you anymore at all. There was a wonderful story I came across about back when the Iron Curtain was a thing, that there in East Germany, there was a little old woman who lived in an apartment across the street from this American building. It was a government building. People were going in and out all the time. And she would sit on her balcony and she would just be knitting the whole time. And everybody was like, you know, hey, Frau. And she was actually spying the entire time. She recorded every visitor that went in and went out. She was an agent for the German government. And basically, I mean, she was able to collect a huge amount of intelligence because nobody's looking at, you know, Oma up there with her knitting. And I loved the idea that, you know, whether you are a young and pretty woman, whether you are an aging woman, whether you are a menopausal woman, no matter what you look like, no matter what your sexual orientation is, no matter your age, there will always be a segment of society that doesn't see you or doesn't value you or thinks that you are not important enough to be afraid of.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm so delighted. I feel like I'm fangirling all over the place.
Oh, thank you. I'll fangirl back at you. Thank you for coming.
I got to your writing because of your first series, and I was just wondering if with the success of Veronica and Stoker, will your publisher revisit opening back up or like maybe republishing the Lady Julia series? Because I just love that series. I'd like to see both of them.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and recap this one. The question was about my very first Victorian series, which is the Lady Julia Gray series, and whether that was going to ever be revived, because we did 5 books in it and then 4 novellas. My previous publisher declined to continue the series, and that's the publisher I had before the one I have now, who published Killers and who's publishing the Veronica Speedwell books. The only way that those books would ever even come out physically in print, they're only in print digitally now. The only way they would even come out physically in print again is if we had a television series of, you know, Julia Gray. They would probably bring them out in a print edition. Otherwise, I don't see them being revived. But I mean, never say never, because stranger things have happened. And all I will say is, if you were a fan of Julia Gray, then maybe keep your eyes peeled in the next Veronica Speedwell book. Mm-hmm. Because I like to lay Easter eggs.
Any other questions? Oh, yeah.
Virtual. Okay. Your dialogue between characters is one of my favorite parts in your books. It reminds me of Elizabeth Peters. And that was the hook I used to get my mother to start reading your books. Can you talk a little bit about how you create such natural, snappy dialogue that still conveys the emotion between characters?
Oh, that's a lovely compliment, because I'm a huge Elizabeth Peters fan. I actually will not read River in the Sky because it's the last Elizabeth Peters book. And as long as I don't read it, the series is not over. Thank you. Thank you. You feel me? So to be compared to Elizabeth Peters is a tremendous compliment, and I really appreciate that. The snappy dialogue is, you know, I think that writers, there are things that you click with. There are things that are your strengths. There are things that you do well, that, you know, other authors have other things that they do tremendously well. You know, whatever your skill set is, wherever your home base is, it's something that just comes naturally to you and feels natural to you. And for me, it's that kind of snappy, sparky dialogue. My husband and I still kind of have that repartee with one another, and we've been married 32 years. So you know, it's a very Nick and Nora kind of vibe, which I absolutely love. And I think writing characters with that kind of chemistry is a great deal of fun. And so I can't imagine, I don't even know how to do a book without that. So doing something that is like deeply cerebral or really, really dense, descriptive passages or things like that would definitely be out of my wheelhouse. And not something that I think I would be very good at. So I'm going to stick with my snappy, sparky dialogue and just go from there.
we have any other questions?
Is there another Killers coming out? Are we gonna see the other 4 or this gang of 4 again?
The question was, is there another Killers coming out? Are we going to see this gang of 4 again?
So if that were to happen, that is not the sort of thing that a writer would be allowed to discuss on book tour. That would be the sort of thing that a writer's publishing company would have to
I wouldn't want to
formally announce if it were happening and there were a title attached to it. Until then, a writer would just have to smile non-committally.
Well, your lipstick looks great.
Thank you. Smashbox. Do we have any more questions? I see a hand.
The question was, is she thinking of writing any other genres now that she has tried something new?
I think I've pushed the boundaries enough for a little while. I'm not, I'm fortunate enough to write mystery, and now I'm technically a thriller writer, which I think is absolutely bonkers. I'm actually going to, there's a wonderful mystery and thriller convention called BoucherCon, that I'm actually going back to the West Coast in a week and a half for that, because Killers of a Certain Age is nominated for 2 different awards in thriller categories.
That is amazing.
Thank you. It is actually the only thriller written by a woman nominated in one of the categories.
Wow.
And I am so delighted by that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I am extremely chuffed about that. Especially because I'm nominated against like Mick Herron, and I'm a huge Mick Herron fan. Slow Horses, right?
Yeah.
If you have not read the Mick Herron books, oh my God, Slow Horses is phenomenal. And if you have Apple TV, Slow Horses is the single greatest adaptation of any book in the history of television. I am not overselling it. It is phenomenally good. And you can smell Gary Oldman through the TV. It's so well done. And the books are fantastic. So yeah, I think it's bonkers that I am technically a thriller writer at this point, because I'm a huge chicken, and I don't even think I read a thriller until about 5 years ago when I picked up Oyinkan Braithwaite's My Sister the Serial Killer, which is, if you've ever seen the cover, I don't know if you guys have any copies in stock, but it has a gorgeous young Nigerian woman on the cover, and she's got these gorgeous green sunglasses on, and inside the lenses you can see the silhouette of butcher knives. And it's a quick read, and she is a serial killer, and it is phenomenal. But it's about the relationship of these 2 sisters, and how do you deal with someone that you love who's like, oh, I did a murder. Sorry, I didn't mean to, but he just got dead. And it's so great, because it's really more about the relationship than it is even about the killing, but the killing is really fascinating. And so that sucked me in, because at that point I realized, oh, all thrillers are not men chasing each other around with guns. Sometimes they are different things. And so that kind of sucked me in. I can't read thrillers when I'm home alone. I still don't do that. I'm still a chicken in that regard, but yeah. So I don't know that I would. I mean, I guess I could throw a dragon in something and try some fantasy. But I feel like the people who do fantasy and the people who do romance and the people who do YA are so good at what they do, and those are such specific skill sets that I don't think I have. So I'm going to leave that to them.
One more question?
Okay.
All right.
Thanks. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. And thank you to both of our authors for such a wonderful conversation. We're now going to transition to the signing line. If you would like to purchase a copy of the book or any other book, Liz's book is also great. You can do so upstairs before joining the signing line. If you are willing and able to fold up your chair and set it to the side so a staff member can collect them, we would greatly appreciate it. And we will start the signing line at the Mind, Body, Spirit section right here. And as a reminder, if you enjoyed this event and want to see more like it, we have lots of events. You can see our full calendar on our website, and our events are made possible through book sales. So if you haven't already purchased a book tonight, we really encourage it. We really encourage a purchase to show us your support. It really means a lot to us. And thank you all for coming out.
Thank you.
Thank you.